The crisp sheet of paper in my hand felt heavier than a tombstone. My voice trembled, but I held my parents' gaze. This DNA test says you're not my biological parents. For 28 years, my entire life, you've lied to me. I want to know why. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by my mother's sharp intake of breath. My father, a man I'd always seen as a pillar of strength, seemed to shrink before my eyes, his face ashen. I thought I was prepared for anything, a secret adoption, a youthful mistake, but the truth, when it finally spilled from their lips, was darker and more twisted than anything I could have ever imagined. The story they told me wasn't about love and rescue, but about desperation and a crime that had remained buried for almost 3 decades. Enjoy the story. My world had always been defined by a strange paradox. I was the lucky one. In a family shadowed by a rare genetic condition known as Silverwood syndrome, a cruel lottery that affected my brother, my cousins, and had taken my grandfather, I was miraculously untouched. It was a recessive gene, they explained, and I had simply won the genetic jackpot. While they dealt with chronic pain and physical limitations, I was the picture of health. I felt a strange mix of gratitude and guilt, an outsider in my own bloodline. There were subtle signs, of course. The way our family doctor, old Dr. Evans, would look at me with a profound sadness in his eyes during checkups, the absence of baby photos of me with my older brother Mark. They'd always said the camera was broken that year, a flimsy excuse I'd never had reason to question until now. The DNA test was a whim, a cheap kit I'd bought on a Black Friday sale. Curious about my ancestry, I never expected it to detonate my life. Now, in the suffocating silence of our living room, the ugly truth began to surface. My mother finally broke, her words choked with sobs. "We were so scared, Chloe," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Mark was so sick after he was born. When we found out I was pregnant again, we prayed for a miracle." My father reached for her hand, his own shaking. "The doctors told us the chances of having another child with the syndrome were almost certain. When you were born and you got diagnosed, we broke." I stared at them, confused. "Diagnosed? You told me I was perfectly healthy." My father couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the faded floral pattern on the carpet as he delivered the line that shattered my reality. "You were healthy, Chloe. Our baby wasn't." My mother's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the room like a knife. "You're not our biological daughter, but we didn't adopt you." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What are you saying?" She looked up, her eyes filled with a desperate plea for understanding. "We chose you, Chloe. In the hospital, we chose you." The words, "we chose you," echoed in the cavern of my mind, each repetition stripping them of any warmth, and revealing a sinister core. It wasn't a phrase of love, it was a confession. I sank into the armchair opposite them, the DNA report crinkling in my clenched fist. "Explain," I demanded, my voice cold and hollow. It was my father who finally spoke, his voice raspy with ancient grief. He told me about the night I was born, or rather, the night their daughter was born. Her name was Sarah. She was born with the most aggressive form of Silverwood's syndrome. The doctors gave her weeks, if not days. "We were in a haze of grief," my father said, his gaze distant. "We were in the maternity ward, surrounded by happy families, healthy babies, and our world was ending. Our little girl was dying in an incubator, and there was nothing we could do." He described the hospital, the smell of antiseptic, the faint cries of newborns, the cheerful posters on the walls that felt like a mockery. In the room next to theirs was another new mother, a young girl who seemed completely alone. No family, no visitors. And in the nursery, her baby, a healthy, beautiful girl, slept soundly in a cot next to the incubator holding the dying Sarah. Your birth mother, she was just a kid," my mother added softly. "She looked so lost. We never saw anyone visit her." The air grew thick with their unspoken crime. I could see the scene playing out in my mind's eye, a grainy, horrifying film. I felt a wave of nausea. As my father spoke, I remembered a single object from my infancy that had always seemed out of place. A small hand-knitted blanket with a tiny faded bluebird embroidered in the corner. It was softer and more delicate than any of the other blankets in my baby box. My mother had always said it was a gift from a distant relative. Now I suspected otherwise. "What did you do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. My father took a deep, shuddering breath, the sound of a man confessing to murder. Our Sarah, she'd passed away that night, in the hospital cot, and the nurse on duty was new, overwhelmed. It was a moment of madness, a moment of unbearable pain. He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. We swapped the blankets. We swapped the name tags on the cots. We took you, and we left our daughter in your place. The confession hung in the air, a poisonous cloud. I was a replacement, a stolen child. The foundation of my entire life was a lie built on the death of another baby. My mind reeled with 1,000 questions, but one screamed louder than the rest. Who am I? Who are my real parents? Where are they? My mother began to cry again, a gut-wrenching, hopeless sound. "That's the most terrible part, Chloe," she said, her voice breaking. "We don't know. We made sure no one could ever trace you back to them. We ran, and we never looked back." A dead end. The two people who had stolen my life had also erased it. For the next few days, I moved through my life like a ghost. The face in the mirror felt like a stranger's. Every memory was tainted, a scene from a play in which I was an unwitting actor. The love I'd felt from my parents now felt like the affection one might have for a stolen masterpiece, cherished but owned illegally. Was any of it real? I felt a burning, desperate need to know who I was, to find the family that had lost me. But how? My parents had no names, only a hazy memory of a young, lonely girl in a hospital bed. I felt a surge of anger, then a wave of profound emptiness. I wonder, what would you have done at that moment? Given up or kept searching for that one tiny clue? For weeks, I was paralyzed. But then something shifted. The image of that small, hand-knitted blanket with the bluebird kept flashing in my mind. It was the only tangible link to my past, to my real mother. I tore through my childhood boxes in the attic, my heart pounding with a frantic rhythm. And there it was, at the bottom of a dusty chest, wrapped in plastic. It smelled of lavender and mothballs. I ran my fingers over the delicate stitching of the bluebird, and for the first time, I felt a connection to a woman I had never known. As I examined the blanket, my fingers brushed against something small and hard sewn into the hem. A tiny, almost disintegrated laundry tag. My breath got. On it, barely legible, was a faded number, 34B. It was a long shot, a desperate prayer. I started with the hospital where I was born, but their records from that long ago were archived in inaccessible. Then I had an idea. I began calling every old family-run dry cleaning business in the city, asking if they'd ever had a laundry tag system like this. After dozens of dead ends, an elderly man's voice on the other end of the line said, "Oh, the 34B tags. Yes, we use those for our contract with the old St. Jude's maternity ward for personal items." My heart stopped. He remembered the blankets. There was a local woman, he said, Eleanor Vance. She knitted one for every new mother in that ward for years, a bit of charity work. Her daughter was a nurse there. Eleanor Vance. I had a name. It led me to a small, quiet house with a garden full of roses. The woman who opened the door was in her late 70s, with kind, knowing eyes. When I showed her the blanket, she began to cry. She was my biological grandmother. She told me about her daughter, my mother, who had died from complications just days after giving birth. The hospital had told her and my father that the baby, me, had also died. My father, a young man shattered by grief, had left town and never returned.